InnerQuest explores various pathways through which you can connect with the infinite wisdom of the universe and apply it to personal, professional, and spiritual growth. This program, featuring accomplished practitioners, educators, and authors, is provided by Infinity Foundation, an innovative center for holistic studies and research. We invite you to share this journey with us.
Welcome to InnerQuest. My name is Jay Stone, your host for today, and our guest is Wendy McCarty.
Yes.
Welcome, Wendy.
Nice to be here. Thank you.
Let me tell the audience a little bit about you. Wendy has been working in dual diagnosis, mental health treatment since 2006. She's developed an approach to treating underlying issues that combine spiritual psychology, individual and family therapy with advanced clinical hypnotherapy, providing positive, no-nonsense, long-lasting results. So, brief therapy.
Right. Exactly.
So, first question is, what is the difference between hypnotherapy and hypnosis?
Well, I think hypnosis can be very effective. I just believe that it's more of a suggestion of, instead of having a cigarette, you're going to have a glass of water, rather than hypnotherapy, which kind of goes to the reason you want the cigarette in the first place.
Okay.
So basically, we're taking the craving that comes up and maybe where you feel it in the body, relaxing yourself through a guided meditation of sorts, and going back to the first time you ever felt that feeling.
And do you ever go back into a past life?
You know, that happens, and my teacher that I studied under, Diane Zimberoff, said, I don't really care whether you believe in past lives. If one comes up, you better know what to do about it.
Okay.
So oftentimes people say that it's not from this life, that feeling came into it before then, and they can bring that up for release.
Now, I mentioned in your bio that you do dual diagnosis, and our audience may not know what that is. So
sometimes an addiction will come up with depression, or an addiction will come up with anxiety. So basically, there's a double whammy there. So if you know that, you can use what comes up during the depression, the sadness, or during the anxiety, and understand it as a reason for wanting to get out of there, reason for wanting to use or have unwanted behavior.
Okay, so if I got it correctly, dual diagnosis is working with addiction and some other mental health issue.
That's exactly right.
Okay, yeah. So you primarily work with addictions.
I have. I worked for 5 years at Passages Rehab in California, specifically using hypnotherapy for addictive tendencies.
Okay, and what kind of addictions do your clients have?
All of them. Alcohol, drugs, heroin, all the doozies, as well as it also works with eating disorders as well. Okay. So it's kind of, you can even be addicted to a feeling or addicted to a behavior that's not serving you. And so what we want to do is we want to get to the root of the reason why it got there in the first place.
Now, do you ever teach your clients self-hypnosis or encourage them to practice some type of hypnosis or meditation in between sessions?
Absolutely. But the work that we're doing is, we may, generally speaking, with a deep addiction, there's a trauma or a shock, generally when we're younger. So this hypnotherapy, when you're in that state, you need to know what you're doing, because that person's going back to a memory that they probably never want to remember again in some cases. And the experience that is coming up for them has been buried and can be brutal. So you really know how to guide, you want to know how to guide them through that in a safe way. And basically what you're doing is you're understanding something that if it was horrible and it went wrong for a child, children believe it's their fault, right? That's the ego. I can't control anything, so it must be me. I must be less than. And that's what doesn't feel right, right? So whenever that feeling comes up or a trigger comes in to bring that feeling up, they want to use. So what we're doing,
they want to block it or hide it.
Right. We don't want to feel it. We want to numb it. We want to do whatever we can to get out of it. And so what this does is it goes back to the experience, releases the traumatic event emotionally, because we have it stuck in our body in order for survival, right?
Well, I know with soldiers that have PTSD, that part of the treatment is they go back multiple times in order to de-traumatize from that experience, that traumatic experience.
Right.
And so, do you often go back several times or more to a particular?
I let the person lead it. I mean, literally, if they need to go back to that one experience, they're going to over and over again. And what we understand from shock, there's two different kinds of shock: sympathetic shock and parasympathetic shock. So sympathetic shock is when you're injured and you start shaking so you don't feel the pain, so you don't die from the pain. Parasympathetic shock is when it's too much and you shut down and you kind of go on autopilot. And in that case, and many times for war veterans or children, they trap the emotion because they don't have time to feel it or express it while they're surviving, right? So the body traps the emotion for you so you can continue. Same thing with children. They have no place to process if they see a violent event. They don't know what to do with it, so the body traps it, and then we use the hypnotherapy to tap into that, release it now that we're older, and if they can, reparent themselves through the difficult situation, saying, it wasn't your fault. Mom and dad aren't well right now. You are a good kid.
Okay, so it sounds to me like you're helping your patients develop emotional intelligence. You know,
Resilience and regulation.
Yeah.
Because what's happening is that old faulty negative conclusion is lurking in there. And the reason they get triggered is because it's coming up for resolution. It wants to be healed. So if this thing made you angry about your mom, every time somebody resembles that kind of trigger, you're going to react in anger. Well, they want to get out of that. How do I get out of that? We have to go back to where it formed. Opening up the memory banks, going back in time, and having them, what I do is often I have them see the traumatic scene from above. Witness it, right? Then the adult, if you're working with an adult, different if you're working with a kid or an adolescent, you go back and get that kid out of that scene using your imagination and reparent the child, giving the child what they always deserved and what they always needed.
And you also have a degree in spiritual psychology?
Yes.
And so where does spiritual psychology fit in this? Well, first of all, our audience may not know what spiritual psychology is. So why don't you explain that? And
when I really, in terms of spiritual psychology, I think a lot of people think of it as something religious, and it's absolutely not. What it was for me was, where are you in relationship with yourself or your soul? It's really the psychology of the soul. So the idea being that there's different levels: the physical, the mental, the emotional, and the spiritual level. So you could go on a diet and lose a lot of weight physically, but if you don't believe you're good enough, right, or you're trying to, like we said before, tamp down an old feeling and soothe it with food, that you're worth taking good care of on a soul level, it will come back. So we want to get it up here, and then it will float down through the emotional, mental, and physical levels.
Okay, and so how do you bring the spiritual psychology into your individual sessions? And well, we can ask that later, or answer later, but do you do groups as well?
I do.
Okay,
I do groups as well.
All right, let's, how do you bring the spiritual psychology into a clinical session?
Well, what I do is I do a guided meditation, basically to get them relaxed. We start with the breath, connect it to basically breathing in source energy, right? And understanding that connection with source is divine. That makes you who you really are, who I am really. And so we connect and turn our awareness inward to the inner self, or the authentic self. And then once we get there, and I'm making it quick rather than, it doesn't take too long, but it's not short like this, then I also bring in what is known in many belief systems as the higher self. So that beautiful golden light above the head, connecting you to whatever you deem to be divine, whatever your belief is. Maybe it's God, maybe it's Great Spirit, maybe it's universe, maybe it's light in the stars, maybe it's just your higher knowing. But it's an unconditionally loving guidance.
Well, I love how you start with the breath. If you think of the word respiration, the middle of that is spiri, or spirit.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And so sometimes I say, feel the air going in through the nose and the mouth and into the lungs and into the bloodstreams, waking up who you really are, your unique soul's personality in this life.
And so say a few words about the groups that you do.
Well, oftentimes, especially in the rehab, I would have large groups of people, and you don't want everyone to go into a trauma necessarily in that particular session. So what I would do is get them relaxed, once the light above the head is connected with the divine, I bring that energy, healing, and relaxation through every cell in the body. Mm-hmm. Then I have them go to their favorite place on the planet. Wherever that is, I have them sit or lie comfortably. And then I have them see somebody coming in from the distance. And pretty soon, as that person who they're excited to meet comes closer, I have them see that it's them when they were 8 or 10 years old. So that's kind of an intro group, but I have people who have come to me and said, that's what broke me open. That's the only way I got sober.
And is there a goal for each session, or like each individual member of the group picks their own goal?
I would basically, sometimes people will get it and see themselves at that age. Some people don't, but they get something from the initial guided meditation or guided visualization. The goal is really self-awareness, and really to get an idea of what their relationship is with themselves. Is it good? Do you beat yourself up every day? Are you mean to yourself, or are you good to yourself? What is your self-talk? What are the silent tapes? Are they negative or are they positive? And if they're negative, we got to juice it and make it positive, because then, as we know, the synaptic identity forms in the brain of this stimulus comes in, oh, that's right, I'm not a good person. We need to break that up.
Okay, and you mentioned someone getting sober. Mm-hmm. Do you recommend your clients go to 12-step programs for drug and alcohol addictions?
I have to say, the rehab I worked at was the one place that said it's for people who 12-step doesn't work for them, they say.
Okay.
So Passages was kind of refuted because he said he had the addiction cure, and really AA believes that is the cure. My goal was to get them to get to AA because it's free and it helps and it works, but we had to get over the blocks of maybe an authority issue.
Yes.
You know, you do it this way and you'll be sober, and you know what people with authority issues do. Not doing that.
Well, I know that Bill W., the founder of AA, mm-hmm. Believed in a spiritual program or a higher power.
Absolutely. And I think sometimes what happens is that it becomes a little too shaming for people, and I don't know that Bill W. meant that. And so people who deal with a large amount of shame, it sometimes doesn't work with.
Okay.
So that's why we had to go in kind of through the underlying issue and then use the 12 steps, which basically are the basics of any therapy, really. And if you do them, there's many ways to expound and expand on how the 12 steps work, and really it can be a beautiful program.
Okay. Mm-hmm. What is a faulty
negative conclusion? So that's the thing that happens when you're little and something bad happens. So I always say, if I'm 8 years old, or let's say 9 years old, and my mom is working, and she says, come meet me at the train. I'll be there at 5:30, and I go, and she's not there. Everybody hugs and kisses and sees each other. Says, oh, I'm sorry I missed the train. I'll be on the 6 o'clock. Not there. 7 o'clock. Not there. 8 o'clock. Finally, I go home. I take care of my little sister. What am I going to decide about myself from that? If it happens enough times, I'm going to say, well, I guess I'm not worth coming home to. Mm-hmm. Now, when you look at me, is that your first thing that you would think?
No.
Right. So that's the negative faulty conclusion. So all of us get this some ways or another if it's intense and if it continues to happen. And the little one decides, oh, it must be me. I must be wrong and bad. I must not be worth coming home to. That's what the hypnotherapy changes. Well, so we want to get to the negative faulty conclusion and understand it not to be true.
Okay. And do all your clients have a negative faulty conclusion?
I think we all do. In there, I think we're human, and so that happens. I mean, obviously, we're not angels. We're negative and positive, and I think that the growth comes from the rub. Mm-hmm. But if somebody's having behavior that's not serving them, that they want to get rid of, obviously addictions or eating, or some people are addicted to anger and rage, and they don't like it. We want to get to the reason why. you know, and we model our parents. If our parents do something to us, we may do it to our kids, and we say, I never would have done that. Things like corporal punishment are not socioeconomical. They run in generations. They run in families.
Well, that kind of leads me to this question. Well, what about genetics, you know, where they scan the brains of 3 generations and they see depression in 3 generations, or anxiety, or the propensity towards addiction?
Well, I'm way more nurtured than nature. However, apparently it's both. I have a good friend who's a neuroscientist and said it's really both. Part of me says
I
if your
agree.
mother is bipolar, you're going to be driven crazy. You know, so, or are you modeling her behavior? Or is there, I don't think there's a proof that there's a genetic component to it. To me, it doesn't matter. We still have to get to the underlying issue that's being passed down through the generations. We can look at things clinically or energetically, right? Either way, you can say, you're depressed, you have depression, or you have an energy of depression that came down through your grandmother, or whatever happened. And let's face it, if karma is true, you know, we've been not nice to each other over the centuries. There's a good reason for some difficult traits to have been passed down, as we see. I mean, many parts on the earth have not gotten to where we are getting to finally with being able to heal it on a deeper level.
And when people are successfully recovering from addiction, in my experience, these people are doing multiple things to get well.
That's right.
And you want to just say a few words on that?
I think go on all the rides. I really do. Okay. I think there's different kinds of hypnosis. There's different kinds of hypnotherapy. My life was changed when I witnessed the kind of thing I do, and I know I love my work every single day. But there's all different kinds of modalities. Look at what you're attracted to and go for it.
Oh, I'm not even talking like in therapeutic terms, like starting exercise, changing the diet, you know, changing a lifestyle, changing a job, or even getting divorced could be part of the therapy.
And that's back to what we kind of said earlier, the spiritual, emotional, mental, physical. It starts up here. I am worth taking good care of, no matter what. Right? But we have to believe that to get to the gym sometimes.
Yeah.
Rather than, I'm bad and wrong and I'm fat, so I have to get to the gym. That's not going to feel good. Right? I deserve to be well taken care of by me. So then we get out of the victimship of making it anybody else's fault and understand if we're worth taking good care of on a soul level, that's a whole different feeling about your vibration in life is going to change.
Now, you're also a licensed marriage and family therapist.
Yes.
So where does that fit in with all of this?
Well, it's interesting because I do adults and children and families and couples. And so the elements from everything I just told you I bring in. So depending on what each person is dealing with, what's important to me is to go back to their parents and possibly back to their parents' parents to see what came through, right? And what they're picking up on and what the psychological blind spot is. And so I kind of pick from the toolbox that I have to see what I think would be best. Sometimes I will do, with couples, a double hypno, which is very interesting because when you're under hypnosis, doing hypnotherapy, you're in full control, right? You hear everything. The difference is that the chattery mind is set aside and you're really into your feelings from the past. And generally, great compassion is formed between the couple.
And do you have the couple talking to one another during the trance?
No, what's happening is let's say the husband triggers this thing in the wife when he says such and such. I trace that back to the first time. Now, the husband can see, well, that was a horrible trauma. No wonder that triggers her. I don't want to ever do that again. But now she's released the trauma, understands the negative faulty conclusion about herself of that it was my fault is wrong, and we have a conglomeration of healing energies coming forth within that couple. And then the husband goes. So you kind of put each one on hold, but go back to the root of the difficult issue or the difficult emotion.
And do you think that couples, a man and a woman, doesn't have to be just a man and a woman,
right?
But do you think we choose partners because we want to pick someone so that we can work on our issues?
Well, I think it's all coming up, the reason for that is coming up for resolution. right? So I believe we many times marry the energy of the most conflicted parent. Okay, so if you have a mother who says, you're never enough, you're never enough, you're not doing it well, you can't get it like that, da 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 da, you're going to bring in a partner that, not on face value, which is interesting, we sniffed this one out somehow, boiled down energy. It's the same energy, and it takes a while to find it. And that's because it wants to come up for healing. That person is your soulmate, and bringing that up as a catalyst for you to heal that original conflict with yourself where you thought you weren't enough. And then we have trouble, and then we go to marriage counseling, and oh, that's what you decided about yourself. Well, that's not true. You're wonderful. You're an amazing human being. You're fantastic.
Well, but the marriage, the divorce rate is so high.
Right. That's true. And I think, for a long time we've followed a script. You get married, you have children, sometimes at a young age, sometimes older. But if you're going to have little ones, you can't necessarily put yourself first, right? So it's a little harder to get to know yourself. But if you have conflict that comes up even with them, they will bring the issue forward.
Yeah. Well, I think most couples and families, they're just so busy. It's like,
that's right.
It's like we don't have time. And what's making matters worse today is the social media or the way society is. And
I think that's what's happening with a lot of kids. As soon as they start acting out, we have a lot of drug issues with our young people. We have a lot of suicidal ideation is on the rise, cutting is on the rise, drug use is on the rise. And so, and a lot of...
Well, and it's not just pot. It's those hard drugs.
Right.
It's the cocaine and Molly and...
And guess what it does to a family? Stops them dead in their tracks, and you have to work on it. Right? You have no choice. You have to go to therapy as a family. If you really want to get to it, it didn't come out of nowhere. But I've heard an addiction is a very loving way that to show yourself you need deeper healing, because it's right here. You can see it, and everybody else can see it. So what's in there that needs to be healed? And then generally, what'll happen is the family, the parents, they know where it came from because they know how they were treated by their family. And I think what's happening now is we finally have enough space to heal. Mm-hmm. Right? There's a lot of transgender coming out now. There's space for it. Maybe it's because we're not, knock on wood, not in a war right now, right? We're not completely on, lookout. So some people are getting therapy. Maybe it's only the top 10% of the population, but it's getting there. It's getting to that deeper healing that's going to end these trends in these generations where nobody spoke about it because we had to feed ourselves.
Yeah. What about, have you worked with addictions to like technology and social media? Mm-hmm. If there's a parent out there who's watching, because I know you work with children and adolescents.
Mm-hmm. Mostly adolescents, yeah.
Okay. What would you say to a parent that their children are just on social media way too much or too addicted to their phones?
I think what's happened is that, some of it's the new relaxation. Okay, it's that they don't go out and play so much anymore in the winter or the cold, but they're playing the game on a video screen. What I would say is that if they are getting bad grades, if they don't have a support system at school, if they don't have good friends, you got to get into therapy because then they're using it to numb something. Mm-hmm. Okay, if they're functional and that's their way of relaxing, it's kind of like TV was. So I think
the vast teenage vast wasteland.
It's true, but I think let's put it this way. Everyone says this generation, this society, I don't buy it at all. There's too many successful young kids. Look, our businesses aren't folding. The people coming out of college have PhDs. Things they're becoming leaders because they haven't had to deal with such stress and trauma.
And since you work with addictions, what do you think about the increasing number of states legalizing marijuana? Would you want to see recreational marijuana legalized in Illinois?
For me, when I think of the actual effects on it as a person, alcohol seems more devastating to me in terms of getting in a car and driving it, but it's, right, I think it's with a doctor's prescription. If the doctor,
So then you would continue what we're doing, just doing, you would be someone that would be good to go down in Springfield and give some testimony.
Right.
Because of your knowledge and experience and practice.
I mean, I think what pot does actually is it puts a Band-Aid, right? So if somebody's really upset and they don't, sometimes they will reject bipolar medication. For a little while, they'll feel better if they have THC. I'm a big fan in the research on the CBDs because I hear they can be curative of a lot of different things, but I think there's more research that has to be done. But I'd say if you have a psychiatrist prescribing that for you, for a Band-Aid, for a respite, and that person who knows your body well can prescribe it for you, I think if you can get relief, do it.
Well, how does a person know when he or she has an addiction?
It's when you can take the little test online on AA.com.
Okay.
Right, but or is it .org? But there's things that you want to stop and you can't.
Okay.
Right, you want to say, well, I don't want to drink tonight, but somehow you end up drinking
and
or
that's,
using.
And
whatever.
that's when people should reach out for help to someone like you.
Well, and the thing is, too, it's an issue if you're talking about it. People who don't have any addictions, it never comes up. They never talk about how much they drank or what they drank or how hungover they are. It's not an issue. It's just, It's like people in California don't talk about the weather. It's just not in there.
Yeah.
Right? And so as soon as you start hearing someone talk about it, try and manage it, try and control it, worried about it, there's help. That's the most important thing, to know there's a compassionate reason that you can understand of why you're doing it. Right? I don't feel good. I don't know why. Well, let's get in touch with that and make you feel better.
Well, we have under 2 minutes. What would you like to focus or say during the last couple minutes?
I would just say that this work, when I first saw it done, changed my life. And I knew at that, I was in advertising for 20 years as a producer in film production. But when I saw the process of this, going back to the root trauma or the root shock, and seeing those people come back together for themselves, that was it. I was like, I have to do this. I know this is my calling. And so the good thing for me is some people say to me, how do you do that? How do you know what to say at certain times? Maybe it's, spirit coming through me. I have no idea. But it comes through me and I feel it. And it comes easily to me. So I feel like not only am I happy doing it, I'm supposed to be doing it.
And, well, just think of how much you've grown since you've started and where you'll be 5-10 years from now.
I have to say, if you're going to do this, you have to do deep work on yourself first.
And what do you do to rejuvenate and regenerate, because you're dealing with some very difficult issues and difficult people on a daily basis?
In the advanced clinical hypnotherapy, they actually tell you how to protect yourself. You actually surround yourself with kind of a barrier of light, so you don't take on the energies that are negative running around in other people. But often this stone is actually selenite, and it is an energy cleanser. So I wear it all day, every day, and I meditate as much as possible to rejuvenate.
Excellent.
And purify.
Well, getting the signal to wrap it up, Wendy.
Okay.
For more information about Wendy McCarty, Infinity Foundation, Inner Quest talk show, stay tuned to the credits at the end. Until next time, wish you good health, good fortune, and good spirits. Wendy, it's been a pleasure to meet you.
Thank you so much. Nice to meet you, too.
Did you work at Leo Burnett by any chance?
Our guest, Infinity Foundation, or any of our other programs, please visit our website, infinityfoundation.org, or call us at 847-831-8828.